Beautiful. So just to open it up, does anyone have any previous thoughts that they're coming into about Kol Nidre? Does anyone have anything that it brings to mind when you hear it, or a reason why you've chosen to come to this class about the very first prayer said on Yom Kippur?
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
Well, first of all, it's often used as a trope against Jews.
A trope against Jews?
Yeah, the idea that we can excuse ourselves from our mistakes. And second of all, honestly, I had to look it up to actually remind myself what's going on here. Because I was thinking it's that great prayer I love on high holidays. Give me the power to pray, the power to pray, the ability to pray. So that's now I want to hear the real stuff.
We'll get into it for sure. Does anyone else have any thoughts about Kol Nidre? Just general thoughts? Yeah, Norma.
Well, Kol is voice. What is Nidre?
Kol is all in the spelling. Kol with a kuf is voice. This is a kaf.
And Nidre?
Vows.
Vows, all vows. So does this come from 1492? What happened in?
This does not. This actually comes from late antiquity, between the 6th to 9th century, they think. It's pretty old.
Okay.
It's actually also in Aramaic, which kind of tells us a bit about where the prayer is from, because this was the vernacular at the time. Another prayer in Aramaic, does anyone know another prayer in Aramaic that we say all the time? Kaddish, exactly. So we know it's about, it's a time when people's vernacular, the common language they were using was Aramaic. So we know at least that much for sure.
Okay, so I guess you'll be telling us that.
A little bit of background for sure.
Is the Kol of the hot Kol, like our newsletter,
Yep.
all or voice?
No, the voice.
It's voice. Okay.
It's voice, yes. Well, it could be everything or the voice. Hakol, I would imagine, means the voice.
But it could mean everything. Because
Yeah.
it's just based on spelling. Okay.
Because it's in English, but it's with a K, not a C. I don't know.
Okay.
Good question.
Did you need my laptop?
Well, is everyone okay without the way that this is set up, with my fact that can you all hear me? I see Kathy, you have your hand to your ear.
Yeah, well, when there's side talk, but I wanted to say that Kol Nidre was it makes me think of my father, Alav Sholem, because it was the most important day for him to never be late.
That's beautiful.
It was so crucial to him that I particularly think about him. Well, I think about him on the high holidays, but particularly for Kol Nidre.
That's beautiful, Kathy, and thank you for sharing that specifically, because one of the reasons that we are supposed to say, it's unclear why exactly, in Judaism, why do we do this? Well, here are 10 different reasons why we might do that. But one of the reasons why we're supposed to say Kol Nidre 3 times, one of the reasons why they say that's what we do, is for the latecomers, just in case you missed it the first 2 times. If you're late to Yom Kippur, you don't wanna miss this one. It's a pretty important one. And I also appreciate Kathy, you saying that first of all, that the high holidays always bring for us this sense of memory of our loved ones, people who we've come to services before, people who we're thinking about during these times, of course, especially Yom Kippur, but all of them, there's this idea that we're going to end with Yizkor, right? We're going to end with this idea of memory. But there's also this ancient and archaic memory that we carry with us when we're coming to the holidays and saying these prayers that people have said, and these powerful moments. And it's so powerful, Kol Nidre. We say it 3 times. It's not for nothing. There's not another prayer that we repeat 3 times in its entirety like this. The Reform movement may or may not do that depending upon their choices. But what's, to me, just so fascinating about this prayer is it's so powerful. It's so daunting and haunting, actually, that, when you start with, and I wish I was a cantor or could press play right now in a jukebox, like that first Kol Nidre, the way that hits and starts Yom Kippur, it's like you can't not pay attention. Like, we're here, like all of the vows and promises, etc. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But what's fascinating to me is that this actually isn't a prayer at all. It's not a prayer. What we're saying here, what we're studying today, I know it's supposed to be a prayer class for the high holidays, and I feel like maybe some people are thinking they've been tricked to coming to a class on Kol Nidre that isn't a prayer, but it's not a prayer. It's actually a pretty dry legal text. And we're going to talk about why it is that we begin Kol Nidre with a pretty dry legal text. And it is, of course, because I always think things that seem obvious but aren't are fascinating. We're going to just read through this text and then talk about what exactly is happening in this text, what's the purpose of it, where it comes from, why we say it, and what it is that it means. Yes, please. So I have it here for you on the screen. My source sheet I can send to you if you'd like, if you are joining us from afar. Who would like to, in their most powerful, doesn't have to be cantorial voice, but maybe legal voice. Do we have any lawyers who can read this text for us? Or just anyone is great. Anyone here?
I'm happy to read.
Go for it.
All vows, prohibitions, oaths, consecrations, restrictions, or equivalent expressions, which we may vow, swear, dedicate, or make during the coming year, from this Yom Kippur until the next Yom Kippur, are hereby annulled. May they all be considered null and void, without effect or power. Our vows shall not be considered vows. Our prohibitions shall not be considered prohibitions, and our oaths shall not be considered oaths.
Thank you. Thank you for the power in that too. I appreciate
Voice from the corner.
it. So what do we have here? What do we see going on in this text? Do you all believe me now that it's not a prayer?
It's like a legal, as I understand it, it's like a sort of legal formula that and it's sort of interesting where we collectively are what we have done, our vows, whatever we've done that's not correct, that it's annulled collectively, and also it's in the future. And at least as I recall, and I'm eager to hear more, that was related to the origin, that it came during the time of the expulsion of the Jews, and we were doing things under duress, accepting another faith. So I'm curious about that. So it's a group process with origins around that time, as I understand it.
So you've hit on some really important parts. It wasn't during that time that it was written, but it is something that speaks about future vows. And we're going to get to why it is. I would think, I suppose, that coming to Kol Nidre, coming to Yom Kippur, and what are we doing on Yom Kippur? What's the point of Yom Kippur?
Repenting.
Repenting. You don't have to say it like this. The point is repenting. And what is repenting?
Seeking forgiveness for past
To
sins.
take an account of what you've done for the past year.
Exactly. And both of you hit on the important word about what we're doing in Yom Kippur, which is repenting on the past, right? We're coming to Yom Kippur and we're repenting on the past. We're doing this process of teshuvah. Repenting sounds like kind of a funny word, which is why I suppose you went like this, because it sounds a bit Christian in anyway when I hear it, because it's not actually, it's an English word. It's not the Jewish word, which is doing this process of teshuvah, which actually means to turn around or to turn from, to make that change, to make an active movement from what you have done in the past to what you hope to do in the future. But Kol Nidre in this case, it's not saying, I'm sorry for all of the promises that I broke in the past. So we're going to talk about why, but first we're going to dive into like the legal some of the legal language here, which I will admit I'm not a lawyer, but I'm fascinated by Jewish law. And halacha here is the system of Jewish law that really begins from the Torah, but that's traced throughout the ages through the Talmud, which is the Mishnah and the Gemara, and then throughout the Middle Ages, there's a bunch more commentaries. We get our medieval commentaries talking about what we're doing with the Jewish law, and then eventually it gets codified in about the 15th, 16th century with the codes that we see coming out of different places. There's different law books, there's different codes. So we have this kind of codification of halacha, but in the end, we've had this system of Jewish law. We know we've been working throughout the system of Jewish law, and we're going to figure out why it is by the end that we are talking about things in the future and not things in the past. Yes, I see Kathy and Larry had their hand up. Kathy.
It seems that the opening is totally counterintuitive. It's saying that our vow, everything's null and void. Like,
right,
whatever you're going to say or have said you're relieved from the commitment of taking the vow.
Right, it doesn't hold any weight.
Doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Right, it doesn't make sense. Why doesn't it make sense though?
Because it undermines the sincerity or the act of what you're doing, which is making vows and taking responsibility for changing. And there, as I see it, the ones that from this Yom Kippur to the next are hereby annulled.
Thank you. I'm sorry, what?
Annulled.
Right, exactly. There's this idea that basically anything you say for the next year, and at first glance, it's like, what are we doing here? Every single thing, any expression, a vow, anything I swear, anything I'm going to dedicate to myself to, anything that I'm saying that I'm going to do, especially when we're about to, throughout this process of Yom Kippur, say that we're going to do all these things, right? We're going to say that we're coming to Yom Kippur, hopefully after having done the process of the work interpersonally and the work within ourselves, we come to Yom Kippur, hopefully with a clean slate, doing the work with God, so that when Ne'ilah happens and the gates are closed, even though they never really close because they're always like inching toward close, when the gates are closed, we have this concept that we've already done the work and we come to this with a clean slate. So it's interesting that we come to Yom Kippur and the first thing we say is that anything we're about to say for the next year, from this Yom Kippur to next Yom Kippur, is annulled. It's such a strange way to open our most important holiday.
So one,
Well, it's, so then what is it about Judaism that fosters one-year commitments, no mas? I mean, that's basically what we're talking about here.
Well, we'll see if that's what we're talking about.
Okay, good.
But I like it. I like where you're going there. It's a good question. That's the right
A
question.
duration thing.
We are right. It doesn't say that forever anything I say is annulled. It's specific. It's exact in the timing. Anything I say from this Yom Kippur until next Yom Kippur, vows, oaths, prohibitions, restrictions, the equivalent. Anything I swear, even though we're about to swear that we won't do a lot of things, right? We're going to be different. Anything from this exact period of time will be annulled. It's interesting that it's time bound. It's not forever. Why don't we just say forever? It's a good question.
I was just trying to think if there's any level, if there's a lawyer, if there's any equivalent to a law that would, comparable that you could be forgiven for something that you haven't done yet, or that you could be non-binding to something that you haven't done yet. It feels like a false pretense to be able to say, I'm gonna do something, but when I do that, it doesn't count.
Right.
Like,
So it's interesting, and I'll just give a clue to everyone now, that this doesn't actually, in the legal standing, have to do with your commitment to another person. So for instance, in this past year from Yom Kippur to Yom Kippur, Adam got married. So this past Yom Kippur, when he said any vows that I have said, that I will say in the future are null and void, that your wedding is not counting in that. That when you say a vow and you get married to someone else, that is a legal and binding commitment that you have made, and this is not what this is talking about. The same for any vows that you might do for the government, the same for any, thing that is a binding contract or binding vow, oath, what have you, between you and someone else or between you and the government. That's actually not what we're talking about. We're talking about a different category of vows, because remember, this is a legal document. This is a legal declaration. And before we go a little bit deeper into the, I want to say, legality of it, what are vows, oaths, all these different categories? Does anyone know the difference between a vow and an oath, or think they know the difference? And you can, Craig, maybe.
What?
Is everyone able to see each other? I feel like I would like to see everyone if that's possible. Is it possible?
To see everyone?
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Any idea what the difference between a vow and an oath would be?
Vow could be just, an oath sounds like it's a legal document. A vow, I'm not sure of. I'm not an attorney, but it's just something I come up with. I vow to do X, but I'm not legally bound to do it, I don't think. But I vow to do it. I promise
You're
to
saying
do
is
it. It's a promise. I'm not sure that it has, I don't know.
so
I don't.
Gail, if I could just clarify, are you saying like an oath is like when we say I solemnly swear, right? That's a more legal idea,
Yes.
and a vow is just what you're saying out loud.
Yes, more or
I
less.
vow to go to the gym more.
Right. But versus taking an oath where I sign that I'm going to sign up at the gym.
Got it, correct.
I guess.
Anyone else have an idea?
Well,
Or
there's
thoughts?
just as a example that we see every 4 years, the oath of office. So like the president puts his or her hand on the Bible. And so there's, I don't know, when I think of oath, that's what I think of.
But it's to another human being.
Is it?
Yeah, an oath is to another human being, whereas a vow is a promise made directly to God.
Oh, is that right?
That sounds good.
Well, we'll see what's happening here in this text soon. Anyone else think they know what's going on here between a vow and an oath? See someone's hand is raised. I can't read the name. I'm so sorry.
Yes, hi. I would think that a vow has more of a connotation of devotion, while oaths, like without any, like you vow to do something and nothing's going to get in your way because you're so devoted, but an oath seems to be really rigid. That's I guess my interpretation of it. Could have more stipulations.
Right. I'm agreeing with everyone that when I hear these words in English especially, there's this idea of like a vow is kind of a promise, right? It's not like a binding promise, but it's like a promise to do something. And an oath has a little bit more, maybe because again of the English connotation, that like the I solemnly swear, when you make an oath, when you have to, put your hand on the Torah or whatever they use, the Bible in the court, there's this idea that it's more binding than a vow, which is a promise or promise-like. However, in this specific context, these are two very distinct categories, and we have here, if everyone can see at the beginning of the prayer, it says Kol Nidre. So a neder is a vow in this case. Asure is something that's asur, which means a prohibition. We're not going to talk too much about that category. But a shavuot is a shavua. A shavua shav is the oath that we're talking about here. So the neder is the vow, and the shavua is the oath. Okay, so we have these two different categories. Kind of makes me wish that I was a teacher with a board and I could write this down because there's going to be a couple different things that fall in these different categories. But before I continue, Amy, do you have a question?
Yes, it may just be an artifact of the translation, but I note that it uses the word vow in two slightly different ways. All vows, prohibitions, et cetera, which we may vow from this Yom Kippur until the next Yom are hereby annulled. You see what I mean? First, it's using vow as a noun, and then it becomes a verb. So that I find that confusing. All vows that we may vow, but we're also what all oaths that we may vow also. You see what I mean?
Yes, but I think that you're missing the rest of it, which is all of these are turned into nouns. Do you see what I mean? Which we may vow, swear, dedicate, or make.
Okay.
Do you see the second part of it?
Yes. Okay.
So all of those are kind of used in there, all blank, which we may blank. There's kind of the verb, the noun and then the verb in for each of those sentences, for each of those contexts. But we're going to talk today specifically just about Nidre and Shavua Shav, which the neder is the actual vow itself, and the Shavua is the oath. And an oath is a positive declaration, and a neder, a vow, is a negative declaration. Okay, I'm gonna say that one more time. Oath is positive, neder is negative. Kind of easy to remember because neder is negative, right? So we have this idea that a vow, it used to be something that was actually to bring a sacrifice to the temple, but that's not really relevant anymore, so we're not going to talk about that. And ever since this was written, we haven't had a temple, so kind of either here nor there. But a vow is to not do something or to not derive benefit from something. To not do something or to not derive benefit from something. Who can give me an example of what a vow might be in that case? You can think in terms of Judaism or you can think in terms of our own lives.
Ten Commandments, full of knots.
Right, it's full of knots, exactly. So you're saying don't lie, like I will not lie, okay? And you're saying that there's a lot of these coming in. I will not steal, murder.
The basic stuff is mostly knots. Mostly vows, I think, is what you're saying.
There's negatives. In the case of this, it would be something more like I am not going to eat matzah on Yom Kippur. I vow that I am not going to eat matzah on Yom Kippur. Okay, that's like the category that we're talking about. I vow that I'm not going to eat in the sukkah. I vow that I'm not going to light the Shabbat candles. That's a vow. That's the neder in this specific category that we're talking about. A shavua or a shavua shav is a positive declaration, something that you swear is true, a way that you're using God's name. And if you're using God's name and for something that's true, like if I say, I'm going to say it. Sorry, I swear to God that this is water. That's really bad, but good thing I already annulled my promise last Yom Kippur. But anyway, the point is that why do I have to say that if it's true? If something's already true, we all know it to be true, or at least you're believing me that it's true, then you're taking God's name in vain. Because why would you have to swear that it's true if it's already true? Another idea is to swear. If you swear that you're not going to do a mitzvah, it's going against a commandment. It also falls in the oath category. I know this is a little bit confusing, especially because I don't have a whiteboard. Or if you swear that you're going to do something that's impossible. So there's these like kind of three categories of what falls into oath. So if I swear that I'm not going to sleep for 3 days, that's an oath. But that's an oath that's impossible. It's a positive. It's confusing. It's actually not a positive declaration, but you can't swear to do something that's impossible. That falls into the oath category. Any questions about what I just said? I'm sure there are questions. Yes.
Is that me?
Yes.
Oh, hi. What about wedding vows? Are the vows in a Jewish wedding ceremony, are they called vows, or like when you say I am my beloved and my beloved is mine, that's not a negative? I'm just curious if that's
a great question. So these vows, this whole construction it excludes something that's between you and another person in that legal context. Yes. So there's this idea that, so wedding vows are not null and void, they are true and hopefully, are kept up to our vows.
Does God count as another person?
God would not count as another person. God is the thing that we're not supposed to promise that we're doing something or not doing something to. We're not supposed to, but to make oaths and promises to or about God, and that's really what we're dealing with, but also to ourselves. And there's a question of like, what's the difference really? But yes, God would count in this concept, and the reason that they're both dangerous. So shavua, this idea of oath, you can't make an oath that negates the first oath. It's very confusing, but if I say that I am going against a mitzvah or a commandment, which is one of the categories of a shavua, I can't do that. And why? The rabbis say it's because when we were at Mount Sinai, we said, all of us made the commitment, whether you like it or not, our ancestors did on behalf of us, or everyone that was standing on Mount Sinai, which, as the tradition says, is every Jew that was or ever will be standing at Sinai. And we made this oath, Na'aseh v'nishma, which is we will do and we will say. That basically we took on the acceptance of the commandments. So therefore, it's impossible for us to make an oath that's going to outdo another command, another oath. So we can't do that. It doesn't work. So that's just one thing to say. However, a neder is something that you can take a vow, and then you can make a vow that disregards that makes that first vow null and void. Okay? So if you say, I'm not going to eat matzah, you can actually make that worse by, or you can negate it by saying, now I vow that I am going to eat matzah. And an oath, a vow itself, a neder, does not take God's name in vain. So these are, halacha distinguishes between a person making an oath and between a person making a shavua. And here's where we have a couple of things. First of all, whichever one it is, and I know that I just said a lot of things, but all of these are things that count in either category, so I'm sorry if that was confusing. And it isn't super hyper clear, but all of this means that what we say matters, right? That our words and what we say can have pretty tremendous impact if we're saying that a vow and an oath are like these really big, powerful, important things. And the difference between a neder and a shavua, the difference between a vow and an oath is also that an oath is something a person is making. So it's an individual that is making an oath. So I am saying I am making an oath that I'm going to keep the commandments, right? Our original oath that we made, that original shavua. And a neder is about an object itself. So that's really where the distinguishing feature comes, that an oath is the person is doing it, and a neder is about an object. So I will not eat matzah, or I will not sit in a sukkah. That's the matzah, and that's the sukkah. And the reason that they're able to make this distinction is because the subject, the matzah or the sukkah, is already something that's like away from oneself, right? It's already something that isn't a part of oneself. And halacha validates the integrity of the individual that says, that's something that's alien to me, so I want to push myself away from it, right? And the other thing about halacha is it desperately wants us to fulfill our vows and oaths, even though we're not really allowed to say them, and we'll get to that. So it's this weird thing of we're not supposed to do it, but we also understand that we're human and sometimes we're going to do and say things, and we know that our words have power, so we want to be really careful with it, which is why we have this whole concept of kol nidre. And we're going to just take a little look into the actual sources itself about these vows and these oaths. But before we actually jump into the Torah, does anyone need any clarifying questions or want to say anything about these two kind of categories of a vow and an oath? Two very important categories in Judaism. Would anyone like to read Numbers 30-3?
If a householder makes a vow to Adonai and takes on an oath imposing the obligation on themselves, they shall not break their pledge. must carry out all that has crossed their lips.
Thank you, Neil. Right, so any comments on this?
So that contradicts the contradiction, correct?
Right, why do we have a Kol Nidre prayer if
The first one says that everything's in Numbers. But then in Numbers it's saying that you cannot break that pledge.
so Numbers is actually first, Kol Nidre is second in terms of his, like the way it's written. But what does it mean? Right, I see what you're saying. So if the Torah says we can't break the pledge, then how is it that we have Kol Nidre? And we'll see that it's really because the Torah says that we can't break a pledge, then we have Kol Nidre. But there's a specific word in this, there's a specific idea in this in this text itself that we're going to get to at the end, because that's really like the whole idea of how we can have this Kol Nidre if it's clearly a prohibition in the Torah to break an oath. What about this the second piece of Torah in Deuteronomy? Who would like to read that? It's short, I promise.
When you make a vow to your God, Adonai, do not put off fulfilling it, for your God will require it of you, and you will have incurred guilt. Whereas you incur no guilt if you refrain from vowing. You must fulfill what has crossed your lips and perform what you have voluntarily vowed to your God, Adonai, having made the promise with your own mouth.
Beautiful. So again, kind of driving home the same point, which is what's the point here of both of these pieces of Torah?
You own what you say you're going to do.
Exactly. You own what you say you're going to do. So much so that it's legal, right? Like this has become, it kind of doesn't matter if it's a vow or an oath, right? I know we were saying earlier, like a vow seems a little bit looser and an oath seems a little bit like like it has more legal standing. But in this case, it's anything that crosses your lips.
You own.
You own, right? That is something that becomes, once you say it, and actually there's this point that the rabbis argue, even if you do something enough times, it becomes a vow, even if you haven't said it. If you just do it enough times, then essentially it's like you're making a promise. So we want to be really careful. The rabbis really, 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 really want to take this vowing and oathing so seriously that they actually prefer that you not make any vows and that you not make any oaths. But it is, according to Judaism, a part of our tradition, right? That your vows and your oaths have this insanely high standing, right? There's this, it's really, really, really important. So because of that, we don't want to make oaths and vows. But then why do we have Kol Nidre if it says,
Exactly.
if it says that we can't break our promises, and if it says that we hold the vows and oaths at such high regard that it's legal, it ends up becoming a legal matter. So why do we have Kol Nidre then? And how do we have Kol Nidre then? But why? Why would we have Kol Nidre if the Torah says this? And why do we have it once a year? Not just Kol Nidre, but why do we have it every year?
Perhaps it's more of a demand upon your own self to know that you should be standing among hundreds or even 10, and all vowing to do a pledge to make the world a better place. Other people are saying the same thing, but you're all hearing each other, and maybe it makes you more accountable. I'm not sure.
You're getting to that. That's absolutely it, Gail. And we're gonna talk more about that idea that you don't just say Kol Nidre by yourself. You can't say Kol Nidre by yourself. We're gonna talk about why that is soon. But why do we have Kol Nidre if the Torah says that anything that you say or do, it becomes your word, and whatever crosses your lips then becomes your vow and your oath, and so you can't not do what you say you're going to do. So for instance, if I say the night before I go to bed, I'm gonna go to the gym tomorrow, and I don't go to the gym tomorrow, I'm in a predicament here. I'm in a legal predicament here, Jewish law, but nonetheless. So why? Why do we have Kol Nidre then? Larry or Kathy, whoever's raised your hand.
I did. So I think maybe it's saying we recognize that we're human and that we get another chance.
Exactly. I agree with you 100%. That it's so powerful to make these vows and oaths that it's actually too powerful to give humans that kind of power with their words. So by having this construction of the Kol Nidre prayer, they are released from this thing that is so heavy. If you say something and you don't do it, you're defying God. Not just yourself, but you're defying God. So we don't want to put ourselves in that predicament. Halakha doesn't want us to be put in that predicament. So they have to do some really interesting legal work to make sure that we aren't held accountable for every single thing we say. Now, that being said, we have to remember that they're also saying our words are very important, but we don't want to be held legally accountable. By the way, in Torah times, there were some actual consequences as well, including flogging, depending on the vow and the oath, by the way. Each of the confusing categories I told you about required X amount of blank, flogging or whatever the consequence may be. We're not going to talk about it in those terms at this point. We haven't dealt with that, especially since the rabbis wrote this. But they have to do some really interesting manipulation to make sure that we're not accidentally violating a law that we don't mean to be violating, because it's so easy to say something, right? How easy, does anyone have an example of something that they've said that, don't worry, it's null and void from last year, people remember, that they've said that they didn't keep their promise, and it can be light-hearted if you wish, or heavy if you want to share. Time when they, yeah.
So I don't understand why in this first paragraph that our vows and oaths from this year to the next year are annulled.
We're gonna get to it. Why it's future tense?
Why what?
Why it's the future?
Yeah, that's right.
So we're gonna talk about that.
So why make the vows? Huh?
Why make a vow and oath?
Yeah, because they're annulled, but you're going to talk about.
But we're also not, it's not that we're not supposed to, but we have to take it pretty seriously when we do, so we be very careful when we do, but because of that, we're really not supposed to. Because if we do, then we have to do what we say we're gonna do. So if we know that, then we really shouldn't be saying those things because we take them pretty seriously.
Yeah,
Yes.
Why wouldn't it say for the ones for your vows and oaths and this and that from the past year be null and void instead of your intentions for the next year? Like if you already know I'm making these things, but I'm going to be forgiven because I'm only human, then are you that responsible for your actions?
Beautiful. That's a great question. And both the answer is that it's true that we know that we're human and we know that we're going to make these mistakes, which is why we have Yom Kippur every year, because it really gives us an opportunity to check ourselves, but it also gives an opportunity for like the next 13-year-olds to be able to say it as well, right? We can't just have one time where we say it. We have to continuously say it every single year. But we're also, again, as much as I want to pull something beautiful out of it, which hopefully I will at the end, it's still a pretty dry legal document that we're working with here, right? So Kathy, to kind of answer your question, hopefully, there's something that's happening that there's a reason everyone is pointing out the same idea, right? Why does it say the future vows and oaths? It can't say the past vows and oaths. Why can't it say the past vows and oaths? We just read it. Yeah, Amy?
Well, is it because according to the Torah, we should, if we're God-fearing people, we should have been true to whatever we said we were going to do or however we said we were going to act in the past year.
Right, because the Torah says that we can't say that that if we say we're gonna do something and we don't do it, then that's usur, right? That's prohibited. That's violating the Torah. So therefore, we can't have a text that we see on Yom Kippur which violates the Torah. Does that make sense? If we were to say Kol Nidre, all the vows that we said last year are null and void, that would be in violation of the Torah. That would be in direct violation of the Torah, and we can't do that. We can't be in direct violation of the Torah. So they have to get super creative with Jewish law. And it doesn't say in the Torah that you can't annul a vow or an oath that you're going to make in the future. It says anything that passes your lips that you say, you have to do, right? And if you don't do it, you're in direct violation of the Torah. But it doesn't say that anything you say you're going to do in the future year, that if you don't do if you say right now that anything you say in the next year is null and void, it doesn't have that loophole anywhere in the Torah. So we have Kol Nidre to protect us from accidentally making a vow or an oath in the year to come that we might accidentally violate because we're human. And we know that we're going to violate this, which is A, why I love Judaism and I clearly get very passionate about this stuff, and B, why I love the rabbis because they were so creative. Any thoughts on that? Yes.
Is the first time that you say Kol Nidre at 13?
Well, the first time that you're held to the commandments are at 13, which is why you're a bar mitzvah, because you're the son of you particularly would be a son of the commandments, which means that you are held reliable, accountable.
So are you held reliable for the sins, for the oaths that you make between your bar bat mitzvah and the first Kol Nidre that you?
Halachically, are you asking a legal question?
Sure.
I don't know the answer to that question. So you're saying if at 12 and a half,
right,
you say Kol Nidre, or you don't
No,
because
no,
you're not
13
held
and a
reliable
half.
when you're 13 and a half
Right.
for the future year, because you're talking about the future year only.
Right.
So what about that half a year? I don't know.
Not covered there.
There might be a loop, that might be a not covered year. Yes, I don't know. Good question. Very added question. Does anyone else have a thought about this? This, I think, brilliant concept. Do you all accept this, the way that the rabbis do this? Do you think, does it make sense to you? Not everyone accepts it. I'm just gonna let you know. I brought just 2 examples of, there are so many. I just read through so many examples of people who said, this isn't halachically sound, like this doesn't make sense, you can't do this. And just in here, this in the sources, it says Rav Nachshon Bar Tzadok Gaon, who was alive during this time period, 870. This isn't his entire life, obviously, but this is when he wrote this book, or this piece of text. We do not say Kol Nidre in Babylonia, right? That it wasn't exactly like everyone was accepting these things, because it's kind of tricky the way that they manipulate this idea of it. And so it wasn't always widely accepted, and perhaps it was the forced conversions that actually made this to be a widely accepted and communal, let's say, prayer, because that is what we would call it in this context of Yom Kippur. But it wasn't that it just, that the legal system took this and everyone just accepted this as, that this is the way the system works. But at this point in our day today, we have over history, for different reasons, including the Reform communities, accepted that Kol Nidre is the prayer that starts off Yom Kippur, is the text, I should stop saying prayer, but is the text that kicks off Yom Kippur. Here, the next text says, official proclamation of the Tsar in 1875 is asking for rabbis' clarification of Kol Nidre. They respond that it only pertains to vows that do not involve others, not applicable promises to the government or courts. So this kind of answers our question of, okay, we're going to accept it, but we're going to limit it, because what if you get married? What if you have things in the courts, etc.? What if, you say something to another person, like, I promise that if you do my laundry for a week, I will pay you X amount of dollars without writing a contract. We do hold true to those words, and they're not null and void by this prayer, or by this piece of text. But there is a tricky part, and I think Adam was pointing this before. We're gonna flip back to Numbers 33. It says, we're gonna read it again. If a householder makes a vow to Adonai or takes an oath imposing an obligation on themselves, they shall not break their pledge. They must carry out all that has crossed their lips. So a person, I'm sorry, what?
But I'm thinking as you read the next Deuteronomy, number 23, whereas you incur no, and then our screen needs to move, no guilt probably,
Yes.
You don't, so maybe it's better to shut up and not say anything.
Absolutely. By the way, that is the best case scenario, Gail, is that you shut up and don't say anything. That's what we hope that you do. But at the same time, we know that doesn't always work like that. So therefore, we do have to say things sometimes, and we do have to make promises, and we do have to make oaths. And, there are reasons why we would do that. But again, there's this idea of you have to perform what comes out of your mouth. But again, in Numbers 30, if you take a vow, you have to do it, right? And you can't release yourself from doing it once you take that vow. But it doesn't say, again, because they're being super specific and literal, because the rabbis, the community wanted this to not be something that people were bound to in such a stringent way. It doesn't say that if you go before a Beit Din, which is a court of three, or you come before a community, which would be at minimum a minyan, that if you say all of the vows and oaths that I'm about to say in this next year are null and void, it doesn't say that they can't release you, that the power of the community or the power of the court of a Beit Din can't release you, which is why you can't say Kol Nidre by yourself, because it doesn't count. Which is why you have to come before a community, which is why you have to come to a service and say Kol Nidre, potentially 3 times, for the point that you're really, that everyone is hearing and everyone is witnessing you say every word. And again, just in case you come late, that you at least hear the 3rd reciting of this text, because the community does have the power to hear you, to witness, and that's the idea of a Beit Din, right, as well, that the community has the power to witness you saying that anything I'm gonna say in the next year, any oaths or any prohibitions or any vows that I vow, will be null and void for the next year. So we have a couple things going on here, and Craig, if you can exit out of the screen, just so that we can all see each other's faces, I think is beautiful. We have a couple things going on here. First of all, we have this loophole that the text doesn't say that you can't say that anything I'm gonna say in the next year is null and void, but also we have this loophole that the text says that the person must carry out all that has crossed their lips, that they're not able to release themselves of the vow, but it doesn't say that a community isn't allowed to release them of this vow. And I think both pieces of that make coming to a Yom Kippur service even more powerful, because saying a prayer is beautiful, and I love prayers, I'm nothing against prayers or anything, but coming to a service and starting out Kol Nidre for the sake of being a witness to other people and their humanity, and saying, we're all gonna mess up this year. We're all gonna mess up. We know we're all gonna mess up in so many different ways, and that's why we have Yom Kippur again next year, and that's why we're gonna say these same exact words again next year, right? But we're coming to Yom Kippur, not just for ourselves, but to give other people the opportunity, because each of us, if we thought this wasn't important and we didn't come, then nobody would come to Yom Kippur, right? So each of us is the power, has the power, and is the power to make community. And we're coming to Yom Kippur to be witness and to be in community, to hear other people's words. This isn't about God hearing the words, right? This is a legal system where we have to be in community to say these words. And I don't want to say it's nothing to do with God, because these vows and oaths would be to God or with God, but the point is that the point of this prayer that opens the most important Jewish holiday arguably on our calendar is to be there for each other, to witness our humanity, and to be understanding of the other, and to actually get to carry the weight of taking this off of their shoulders. As we begin the process of releasing ourselves from all that we have done in the past, we start by being there for one another, by bearing witness to the others vows to the other text saying that legally don't hold me accountable for what I'm going to say in the next year. It doesn't mean I'm not going to try to be the best person I can be. It just means that we all understand that we're all human and we're going to make mistakes. And Judaism has done something beautiful in giving us an opportunity to repent for those mistakes and to really be able to turn around from those mistakes and to make better decisions in the year to come. But also Judaism has given us an opportunity to say that in the next year, I'm going to say some things. And can you just see the humanity in me? And if I change my mind, or if I can't do it, or if I can't get to that thing I said I was going to do, can you just be there for me in that moment, remembering that we were all here together, and that I'm releasing you, I'm releasing you, you're releasing me, I'm releasing you, you're releasing you, you're releasing, we're all releasing each other in this moment. How beautiful it is that that's the way that we get to kick off the holiday. Any thoughts, any feelings about that?
Well, it's kind of a very interesting alternative to Catholic confession.
100%.
And it makes me, so now I'm trying to figure it out from the standpoint of confession. Now it's clear, since we have a one-on-one relationship with God, there's a big difference there. Here, we're also saying, when it comes to regret for things that we've committed to that we didn't achieve, that relation is with our community and not a hierarchy of clerical.
Right. That we're all involved, the whole community is involved. It's not just between you and God, it gets all of us involved because we know we're all in relationship with God together. I love that, thank you.
And what happens if you've had an altercation with someone, let's say in your congregation, and they're standing there and there's, asking God for forgiveness, etc. And I'm standing there and I'm thinking, really? I can recall so-and-so, and I didn't feel so good about what she said. What do I do with that? I just forgive her or him?
We'll have,
That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing needs to be expected of me, that I need to have understanding and I need to hope that that person's going to, be less whatever. But in other words, there's some part of me that says, that's not really resolved. This doesn't do it, standing in the same room with the person. And let's say I did something wrong and I'm standing in the room. I know someone else is standing in the room, and maybe what I said was not very kind, but I'm going to start afresh today. So
this doesn't actually have to do with those type of altercations. And in that particular case, that person would need to apologize to you if they've wronged you, or you need to apologize to someone else before coming to Yom Kippur. When we're talking about Yom Kippur, this is specifically now between the person, the individual, and God, which we're actually not supposed to judge those relationships in that work. But we're just supposed to be there for each other, knowing that everyone who's coming to this room is hopefully in their own individual relationship, in their own path toward whatever their relationship is hopefully going to be in the future. But that's a great question, and I can understand why that might feel difficult in those moments. Kathy? Did you have your hand up? No. Oh, sorry.
It was like, it's very important when you're in a group like that to make the distinction that this is about between you and God, because as I understand it, when it's between you and another person, you have to deal with that directly.
Exactly. And before you come to Yom Kippur, you're supposed to deal with that directly. We have the time of Elul, and we have the days of awe. And if those relationships aren't dealt with directly, right, we don't always do what we're supposed to do. That's still something that we have to know is not our business, what somebody else's relationship is to God in the Teshuvah process. We can have our own feelings. Those are what we can control, and those are what we're responsible for, and our own actions.
Okay.
Any last thoughts about Kol Nidre? Does this make you like Kol Nidre more or less now that I've maybe debunk some of the spirituality between it.
This was great. I think for the first time, I really now understand Kol Nidre. It's yeah, it makes sense.
What makes more sense?
More sense.
There's a lot of the deep dives that that still to be done between all the different, the words in the beginning of this Kol Nidre. There's a lot of different categories that fit into what it is that we're saying. But the point of it is that we're not saying things from the past. We're actually looking already at Yom Kippur toward the future and toward the future in community.
Right.
And I hope that for everyone that in this room and on the Zoom screen, that we can come into Kol Nidre this year with a new experience of the prayer, with a little bit more understanding of those around us, and also with an appreciation that our people have constructed this dry legal document that kicks off the first of our texts on Yom Kippur, that actually brings us closer together in community, because immediately it bonds us as people coming together, doing the same thing and being there for one another, but also as people who are hoping that this year to come will be a year where we can do so, where we can be careful of our actions and be thoughtful about different consequences. And we can do so without having the weight on our shoulders, because each of us is helping to lift off that weight a little bit more. So thank you all for studying this prayer with me, again, this text with me. And I hope that you do find some spirituality and some meaning in this giant proclamation that is not for nothing, that all of what we're about to say and all of what we're about to promise in the next year, don't hold us too accountable, because at the end of the day, we're human. And at the end of the day, that's the point of the holiday. That's why we have Yom Kippur. Shana Tova, everyone. Is it too early to say that?
Shana Tova. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's too early to say that. I said that to you last night. Right.
What did he say? I didn't hear that. All right.